It's been quite a number of years since I've used a Shopsmith Lathe Duplicator. Kind of a handy tool if you got a whole bunch of things to turn out. I think the number was something like 75 or 80 rosettes that I had to turn on a TV show back in Dayton, Ohio called The House on North Main Street. And these were just little squares that had bullseyes turned into them with a little convex core. And there was no way to do that accurately without using a duplicator. So I used the Shopsmith duplicator and they came out great. This exact same duplicator on a Shopsmith Mark V was used to great effect on this old house. And actually, Shopsmith made a couple variations of this. In general, they were the same machine or same accessory with a few little minor changes. I picked this one up used, and some of the areas that looked like rust were actually covered in walnut dust. Some of them are also rusty. But there's a number of components that I'll show you over the course of the next video or two that will make you familiar with whatever version of this machine you happen to get your hands on. I don't think it's in production right now, so if you're looking for one of these, you're going to have to pick one up used. And as I've done here with this used one, it's been a little bit of a scrounge to find all the pieces and parts. Once you have everything and you know you have everything, it's actually pretty easy to keep together because this whole rig back behind me can come off in one piece and be hung on the wall quite conveniently. Um, there's two main parts, three main parts of this. One is a table. So instead of using the tool rest that you would normally use for your lathe, you install this plastic laminated table in place of your Shopsmith's main table. Now, why'd they do that? Well, they don't need a miter slot. They don't need an insert for, table insert. But they also need it to drop lower than it possibly can with the tie bar and things that are typically underneath the main table of your Mark V. So plastic laminated table. You also have this tool, which is really the business end of this. This is the part that holds the carbide cutters that you'll be moving along your workpiece. Above this big rig back here is going to hold whatever we're duplicating. So that may be a spindle that you already own. I've had broken spindles that I've been able to join together long enough to put up there and then make a new one. But you can also use a complete made from scratch 1/4 inch plywood. We've even used clear plastic template that you can draw out from a design and turn it without having an original. And then one of my favorite things about this is I can use this tool with the table with none of the rest of it installed, and I can do some freehand turning with this. It's really handy if you've got somebody who has never turned before and just desperately wants to finish a project. I think of my grandkids making pens and things like that. It'll allow them to do that, but it's also really handy if you've got limited mobility. Maybe arthritis is creeping in and you can't hold on to your lathe chisels anymore. If you can guide this tool, you can use this completely freehand. So I'm going to have to do a couple videos, as I said. I thought in this one we'd go ahead and talk about this part right here because no matter what you're using with the duplicator, you're only going to be using at least this much. And I've seen it set up wrong quite a bit. And in fact, whoever I bought this from, they were using it a little bit wrong. So let's talk about what's going on here. It's simply a heavy casting that's got a sliding surface that's been glued around the rim on the bottom. The whole bottom isn't covered with it because that helps to eliminate some friction. This part up here is removable and is simply the guide that's going to be following our original or our template. If you think of this like a key cutting machine, your original key would be up top and then you are producing a new one that matches it below. If I'm not guiding along an original, I don't need to use this part. So what we use here for almost all of these settings is we use our trusted Shopsmith toolbox, the 5/32 hex wrench. There are a couple of other sizes we'll have to have handy as well. But I'm going to take this off for a moment and let's take a look at the rest of this. The handles that I'm holding onto are actually knobs that can themselves be removed. And they're just threaded onto a couple threaded studs that have been inserted in here. If those need to be cleaned, this had so much finish and gunk on it that I pulled those off and cleaned them. So those can come off very easily. And then we have the part that actually holds the tool. So to remove it, and in my case, to get some of the rust off of it, you're going to loosen these 3 set screws right along the face, and then that'll allow you to remove, whoop, sorry about that. That will allow you to remove this part, which is simply holding carbide cutters. Now there is one high-speed steel round cutter that was available at one time. I never liked it, and I don't use it. What I do use is just standard carbide cutters. If you get the size that you want, the diameter and the correct inside diameter, you can buy these from anybody that sells tooling for metalworking. Shopsmith did sell carbide cutters for quite a number of years, but they didn't make carbide cutters, so that's just what they were using. So what's going on here? What are these set screws for, and what's happening here? Well, you can see that this has a very wide groove machined into it, and then a V groove set into the bottom. It doesn't have a flat machined on the side. I always wish it did have a flat here, because these 2 set screws on the outside are going to be pushing in against this and keeping this in place, firmly in place, and theoretically keeping it from rotating. If they had flats on them, there's no chance they would rotate. And the center set screw is used by me only for the very last operation. I'm just cleaning up, and you'll see here in just a moment how I use that. You can see from the indentations that the previous owner on this was driving that center screw in incredibly hard and dimpling this, which, you know, might just render that groove unusable. At least it could, but it's not going to. And then you also see we have a groove in the body of this. That groove is going to be useful for aligning this later. And then in addition to a cap screw that's holding our tooling in place, we have another cap screw with a washer and a little plastic, call that thing, guide, maybe? And we use that to support our cutters. Now, our cutters, as I mentioned, come in a couple different sizes. There is the triangle, which is very much a universal shaping cutter. Some of these are perfectly flat on the top, and some have a little relief on them, like you see here. That was originally done for metalworking. It acts as a chip breaker. It allows the chip to come off of the piece, and then it breaks it away. We actually don't want to see big, long shavings with this style of cutter, and you're not going to see big, long shavings unless you're turning something green or turning plastic. Um, as I mentioned, we've got round ones in different heights. This is a round one that also has that little relief, little bit of a recess as it comes in from the edge. We have square ones, and again, I've got some that are perfectly flat, and I have some with a relief. And there are triangles. I swear I had a triangle. I'm sorry, diamonds. Thought for sure I had a diamond in my hand a little bit ago. I don't know where it went. At any rate, we tighten and loosen these with a 7/64 hex wrench. It's one I think I have one of in my shop. So I'm going to put this into this little bucket where I'll keep those tips. But with that, we use that to install new cutters and also for this little backup piece that we have here. Now, the previous owner was using this without a washer underneath it, and therefore the head of that cap screw chewed this plastic piece all up. And you can see there where they've been driving that in where they shouldn't have. But with the round cutter, it's really not that important. You know, if I'm concerned that the round cutter is going to become loose, and I think that that's going to keep it from spinning around, by the time it's loosened up the spin, that plastic backup is not really going to help us. What it does do is it makes it easier to align the triangle and to align the square and to align the diamond in whatever direction we would want to align that. Let me show you, for example. So let's say I'm going to use the triangle. The triangle is not quite tight. As I slide this plastic piece up towards it, it levels it off against that flat surface, making sure the point is pointing directly straight. Now let me tighten this plastic piece down real quick so it's not moving. And now that almost acts like a little bit of a wrench. Give me something to tighten that triangle against. I can also, because it has that little mouth on it, I can use this to position these cutters, such as the triangle, so that it's got a square face facing forward, like that. So if I want to have that, I can lock that guide piece in place. That'll help me as I get everything tightened. And then it's that little cap screw that actually is going to be doing all of the holding of that, keeping that firmly in place. Now, if I'm going to be using this with the follower, and I'm going to be following a template overhead, I need to have that same shape up above on this follower. So when you would buy any one of these cutters, it would come with, if you remember buying models, this little piece right here when they do plastic injection molding, this is called the sprue. And regardless of what cutter you would purchase, you would get all of the different shapes, and you just break off the shape that you need that's going to match the piece. And then notice that this little follower has a concave back on it. Maybe you can, maybe you can't see that. But I can position this on this guide like that, with the point facing forward or with the flat facing forward. And when I tighten that down, that's going to hold that firmly in that position. I'm going to go back to the round one because, like I said, the round one's the one I use the most because it works, since we're scraping, it works a lot like a round nose scraper. A lot of folks would go with the triangle, and I already mentioned it's kind of a workhorse, but until I get down to doing details, like getting down into the valleys between beads, I can do a lot of my roughing with a round nose. So now that I have that prepared, and by the way, I could have changed these bits without taking this out, but now that I have this prepared, I'm going to slide this in. It's also a great time to put some wax on that. And I'm going to back this knob off. What this knob is, it's just a stop. The further back that knob is, the further back this will slide. And I want to make sure that that little ring is recessed. That ring is going to be really my final diameter. I'm going to turn a bit, and then I'm going to, as I get close to my final size, I can extend that a little bit and make very, very light cuts. So it's a great reminder that you're almost done. But I'm going to put that in, and then once I'm happy with the position, I can move the knob up against it. So I'm basically backing that off, let's say about 1/8 of an inch. So that little ring is about 1/8 of an inch into this fixture. And then we're going to tighten these 2 outer set screws. How tight? Tight enough. I mean, not crazy tight. Now, what I didn't do is I didn't tighten that middle set screw because I don't need to yet. And then finally, if I'm using this as a duplicator, this part would be inserted and it would be locked in place. Now you'll notice that it has the ability to wander a little bit. So I'm going to want to make sure before I tighten this down firmly that I check that with a square to make sure that everything is perfectly aligned. Now, if I put a square up to this right now, what you would see is that this cutter is further back than our follower. And as I mentioned, that's by design. I will make almost all of my cuts, turning everything down as far as I can, and then I will advance this to its final position, and I can do that by loosening the screws, turning the knob, which will begin to push it out. You see it moving out, right? And I'm going to bring it until it's out flush with that line. Maybe I can't see that line. You know what you can do? You can, at this point, bring that set screw. Oh, I didn't even show you the tip of the set screw. This is the only set screw on here that has a cone-shaped tip. So I can bring that forward, And that cone-shaped tip will go into that groove. Let me back it all off again. In fact, I'm going to rotate this because I got those dimples on the other side. With it rotated, I should be able to drive this forward and it will find the center of that groove. Oh, look at that. Look at that. It pushed that right up flush with the groove. I'm just using it for locating. I'm actually not using that to tighten it in place. So that is the proper depth for my final cut. I'll bring this back around here. Oh gosh, I don't like that dimple at all. And here I will tighten front and back, and now I'm ready for my final cuts. This knob at this point is not doing anything, but to keep it from vibrating out, I'll just tighten it forward, and that'll hold it firmly in place. That's a really simple tool that's maybe overly complicated. I don't know. All right, so that's all you need to know for now, especially if you just want to play or you want to turn something freehand. When we get back together, we will tear into the rest of this rig and actually do some duplicating. Sorry for doing this type of a video, but I'm about to head out the door, traveling out of state, but I'll be back soon. Maybe do the follow-up from on the road if there's enough pressing questions to discuss. But if not, probably do that next weekend. So, hey, if you haven't visited mygrowthrings.com, you ought to should. Go check it out. Make it a great day. This duplicator can be used for turning spindles and for duplicating faceplate turning or turning with a chuck. You could turn bowls, platters, and as I mentioned before, I even turned, did I mention that?